Hello, honeys. Welcome back to your weekly recap of Arts World headlines from the last calendar week. This time it's June 7th through the 13th of 2026. Those headlines have been handpicked by yours truly, master's degree holder in art history, Celia Bugno. And we really only have one major administrative announcement before we kick things off for the day. So, friendly reminder here that our Frank Lloyd Wright mini-series, The Masterful Mr. Wright, will be dropping all 5 parts across this weekend beginning June 20th. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that grand reveal, finally. Sources for today's episode include our regulars, Hyperallergic, the Art Newspaper, Art Forum, but if you'd like a complete list, feel free to follow the link to our episode source doc in the description. We've got some follow-ups first for you, honeys. Last week, a Dutch court sentenced each of the 3 men behind the theft of ancient Romanian gold treasures from the Drents Museum in Assen in January 2025 to 3 years and 11 months in prison, despite the help of 2 of them in the recovery of the bulk of the stolen objects as part of a plea agreement made in April of this year. The Why We Care Here, the institution was probably pretty relieved to announce this major development in the 16-month-long case, having faced considerable backlash from the Romanian public over what many perceived as an inadequate response to the theft, but it still does not mitigate the sting of the $6.5 million in insurance compensation that the museum had to pay to Romania, nor from the raised diplomatic tensions between the 2 nations as a result of the theft. Another pretty notable consequence, the dismissal of Ernest Oberlander Tarnavinu, the general director of Romania's National History Museum and now former Romanian culture minister. Our sources also categorized this as a notably long sentence given the Dutch penal system's, quote, typically short prison terms, end quote. We also got further word on the Bayeux Tapestry loan. According to Le Journal des Arts, France's Conseil d'État, its highest administrative court, rejected a formal request by heritage group Sites and Monuments to cancel President Emmanuel Macron's plans to loan the famed yet fragile tapestry to London's British Museum starting June 5th. The court said that it lacked the legal jurisdiction to intervene in what it called acts of government concerning French-British international relations. We care about the decision because it seems to have hinged on the study we covered just last week, which determined that the tapestry was safe to travel under highly specific conditions, aka in a high-tech temperature, vibration, and humidity-controlled box, but there are still worries about potential damage to it circulating. Also last week, after all the Biennale tension in the last few months, arts workers from all corners of Italy called for a national general strike to take place on Friday, June 12th in protest of low wages and unstable working conditions, as well as, per Art News, quote, institutional partnerships with the arms industry allowing them to, inner quote, look away from genocide, end inner quote, of Palestinians, end all quotes. They were joined by Italian labor unions, cultural workers associations, and grassroots collectives in their demands for dignifying, stabilizing, and properly compensating cultural labor by establishing physical and social safety measures to protect workers from injury, discrimination, and exploitation, securing universal welfare benefits for health and pensions, and ensuring freedom for cultural workers to express their dissent and to mobilize. In a statement to Hyperallergic, participant in this strike and organizer of the historic Biennale one last month, Art Not Genocide Alliance, emphasized that the fight for labor rights and the struggle for Palestine, quote, are not separate questions, end quote, and that the sector has real power when, quote, artists, curators, and critics recognize themselves as cultural workers and move as a block with the attendants, ushers, installers, performers, and producers who make culture possible, end quote. The scale of this mobilization is pretty notable, but the timing is as well, coming just a month after the historic strike for Palestine and workers' rights at the Venice Biennale on May 8th, and it also demonstrates how many of its citizens, quote, have been critical of Italy's increased military spending as the nation barrels towards first place for the most debt accrued out of any Eurozone country, end quote, according to Hyperallergic. Art Not Genocide Alliance added, quote, June 12th is the next step in a sustained effort to bring political praxis into the foreground of making culture, making art, and making space, end quote. A quick recap of Sagrada Familia's inauguration day. It was marked by the Pope's presence and the announcement that progress is being made on a deal to realize the staircase, a grand avenue, and a plaza featured in some early architectural plans for the church's southeast side, but which would take the place of 2 city blocks that have occupied that area since 1860. Current residents must have finally started caving, as all sides have reportedly promised news towards a resolution by September. Either way, with the final tower now completed and inaugurated, the Sagrada Familia is the tallest church in the world. Meanwhile, here at home in the States, reports by the Associated Press reveal that a 24-page assessment by the National Park Service has called for the so-called Trumpful Arch to be completed in 3 years and for work to happen 20 hours a day year-round after preliminary surveys and testing began last month. You might remember from Beesness's past that the proposed arch and its location has become the subject of a lawsuit by a group of veterans and a historian who argue that it will interrupt the sightlines of the nation's capital area, but the National Capital Planning Commission has not given the green light as quick as we thought they would because the proposed height of the arch is near enough to a flight path for planes landing at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport that the Federal Aviation Administration must check the plans as well for potential air travel impacts. We did not expect the FAA to be the reason that this plan got delayed, but you know what? We'll take it. Next up, discoveries and announcements of note from the last week. First and foremost, the Knicks and Spurs game got a last-minute arts wager. San Antonio's Department of Arts and Culture challenged the New York City agency to a side bet on the series. Whoever loses Game 5 posts their favorite artwork in the winning city. Which means that all of San Antonio's public art, including Donald Lipsky's Fish of 2009, Ann Wallace's Golden Age of 2013, and Joey Foerso's Canopy of 2018, are in the running to make a New York City appearance. Several artists have also been busy turning New York City into a World Cup sculpture park through a public art initiative which commissioned 23 giant soccer ball sculptures for the 5 boroughs as well as northern New Jersey called Art of the Game. All 23 will stay in place through at least Labor Day, but there are, importantly, multiple beneficiaries of this program. It is the final philanthropic effort of late art patron Agnes Gund, who connected the Jersey City nonprofit Arts 14C with leadership at MoMA, the Met, the Whitney, and more to bring this initiative to life. And 5 of the sculptures will go on to being auctioned at Christie's while the others remain permanently installed, which means more publicly accessible art for all time. But even the proceeds from the Christie's sale will go back to artists, Arts 14C, and an arts education nonprofit that Gund herself founded, so there's lots of good work being done here for all stakeholders. We also got exciting news from 2 of the world's leading authorities on art / our regular news sources for this podcast, Art News and Art Forum, who announced a partnership to launch New York's first ever dedicated and officialized Art Week, dubbed Art Week New York City, which will run from November 11th to November 14th and will feature public programming, neighborhood walking tours, artist talks, gallery openings, and more. They made that announcement on Thursday. Meanwhile, the largest art museum in the American Southwest, the Phoenix Art Museum, announced on June 2nd the gift of 185 works made by indigenous artists from the William P. Healy collection of Native American art. This is the largest gift they've ever received of Native American works. The Healy collection represents 99 Native American artists and 44 tribes, including pieces by Cara Romero, Alan Hauser, and Janae Quick-to-See Smith. The museum will premiere an exhibition of 100-plus collection treasures, which aim to trace creative resilience over the course of a century in August, and that will remain on view for nearly a year, which is one of our major Why We Cares. Speaking of historic gifts, the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C. received its largest gift in the museum's 105-year history from the Sherman Fairchild Foundation, which has donated regularly and significantly to the institution since the 1990s. Their $15 million gift notably includes nearly $12 million earmarked for the institution's endowment, which eases long-term planning pressures a bit and secures coverage of maintenance and staffing, as well as funds for expanded programming for diverse audiences via its satellite space in Southeast DC. Lots for the Phillips Collection to be celebrating here. Meanwhile, and a bit more sadly, David Hockney, the British painter known for his vibrant portraits and sunny compositions of everyday life, passed away in his home at age 88 on June 11th, just 1 month before his birthday. His survivors include his partner, Jean-Pierre Goncalves de Lima, as well as his brothers John and Philip. Our sources write of him that, quote, Hockney was regarded as one of the most beloved artists of the modern pop art era, with a legacy defined by constant experimentation, end quote. Additionally, quote, his work over a prolific 6 decades ranged from psychologically precise portraits to luminous depictions of California poolsides, end quote. R.I.P. to a master. And now, focusing in on the institutional and legal side of the arts world for a minute, we were surprised and disappointed to see the School of the Arts Institute of Chicago has put a professor on leave after she made a Palestine reference. The Chicago School is investigating the director of its art therapy graduate program, Sevneet Talwar, after she assigned a case study asking the 6 students in her course, Cultural Dimensions in Art Therapy, to create a mock therapeutic treatment plan for a queer Arab woman who sympathized with pro-Palestinian protests and feared retaliation under the Trump administration. Talwar received notice from the school's administration, which was reviewed by Hyperallergic, of the fact that they'd opened an investigation into allegations of, quote, discrimination, harassment, and or retaliation, end quote, on April 17th, one day after giving the assignment, which was followed by an in-person notice of her being placed on leave by the school's provost, Martin Berger, on April 20th. We're featuring the headline, honeys, because of all the questions about what exactly motivated the complaint and the fairness of Talwar's treatment by the administration. Talwar has denied all allegations of wrongdoing, particularly of assigning the analysis to just one student, while her lawyer has linked her case to broader university crackdowns on conversations about social justice topics, asking, quote, are SAIC faculty expected to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from their course materials? Are Arab Muslims unworthy of their own case studies? End quote. Talwar herself told Hyperallergic that she's responsible as an art therapy educator for instructing students on the practice's ethical standards prohibiting therapists from denying services based on various protected identities, writing, quote, this situation raises significant concerns regarding academic freedom, institutional governance, faculty rights, and political pressure within higher education, end quote. On June 9th, she filed a complaint against the school with the Illinois Department of Human Rights, but SAIC spokespeople only say that they will not comment on ongoing investigations. The incident also speaks to a longer trend that we've noticed. The national Palestine and Israel politics have already, quote, exacerbated an existing rift between the school and its community over political activism, end quote, in the words of our sources. SAIC risked sanctions or censure from the American Association of University Professors just in 2024 over its responses to calls for a divestment from Israel in a student-curated exhibition, and one lecturer was placed on administrative leave in that case. The same year, a police raid on the SAIC encampment at Grant Park ahead of the Democratic National Convention resulted in the arrests of more than 68 students and prompted widely circulated allegations of so-called brutal treatment by officers. Talwar claimed to The Guardian that the pressures are currently so bad on campus that, quote, there is no tolerance for the very word, end quote, Palestine, that they instead, quote, call it the P word now, end quote. Which leaves our sources and us wondering about the true freedom of speech and expression at that campus right now. How can the School of the Art Institute of Chicago continue to be a place for learning and discussion if the name of a country that is in the international spotlight can't even be said? That's not a good sign. We also got word that Charleston's International African American Museum is temporarily furloughing its entire staff, even senior leadership, in staggered 20-day increments between July 1st and December 31st of this year, but will remain open to the public. The museum is located on a historic site where tens of thousands of enslaved Africans were brought to the U.S. Between the 17th and 19th centuries, known as Gadsden's Wharf, this was recognized in 2024 by UNESCO as one of 22 sites of exceptional significance to the history and teaching of the transatlantic slave trade. This news comes only weeks before the museum's annual Juneteenth celebration, as well as its own 3rd anniversary. Prior to that, the museum had been in the planning stages for 20 years. The headline caught our attention, honeys, because it's part of a worrying larger trend of incidents and instability at African diaspora history institutions across the U.S. in the last few weeks, especially as the museum cited financial pressures and a, quote, shift in the political and funding environment, end quote, as the rationale for these furloughs in a statement to the Post and Courier. Art News reminds us that a 2025 survey by the American Alliance of Museums found that, quote, a third of 511 museum directors across the United States reported losing federal grants or having contracts canceled due to executive orders, with most unable to replace the funding through other sources, end quote. But I mentioned other instances. One of those was the intentional defacement of a painting at the Museum of African American Culture. The Houston institution said that Clarence Hayward's self-portrait Man in the Garden from 2025 was deliberately vandalized by visitors. as confirmed by a spokesperson for the Houston Police Department who told Hyperallergic that police were investigating a May 21st report of quote-unquote criminal mischief. No arrests have been made yet, but the actions are believed to be racially motivated, as the institution's CEO emeritus, John Guest, said that the museum staff identified the suspects as two white men who were also seen flipping off a work by Candy Lopez. The artist himself commended the museum's decision to continue to display his portrait following the incident, with damage visible, to encourage further reflection and conversation by viewers. We also caught the museum's note in its press release on the matter that it is the only African American culture museum in a major United States city that does not receive public funding. That is a serious concern for their longevity and sustainability. And I'm not done yet, honeys. Both of those headlines come on the heels of a suspected arson at the Boston Museum of African American History. Security footage there showed a man fumbling with the contents of a package containing materials for an upcoming Juneteenth celebration before setting them on fire outside the institution 2 weeks ago, as confirmed by President and CEO Noel Trent. Boston police are continuing the investigation alongside the National Park Service as of the time of this recording, the latter of which has faced pressure from state lawmakers to investigate fully, including Senators Edward Markey and Elizabeth Warren, and two House representatives who sent a letter on June 5th to Acting Director Jessica Bowron asking as much. Authorities are asking for the public's help in IDing the suspect and have been working with civil rights groups to identify any possible motive. They've not officially classified the incident as a hate crime. Still, museum officials emphasized that any fire near the site could pose a serious threat to both the historic structures on its campus and the surrounding Beacon Hill neighborhood. Also notable here are the words of Trent, who said to GBH News that, quote, the proximity of burning something, end quote, especially clearly marked Juneteenth materials, quote, near the oldest existing black church building in the country is quite unnerving, end quote. We agree. And because I think we need a change of pace here, some good news. The Metropolitan Museum of Art repatriated two Khmer sculptures to Cambodia last week. Both were sandstone, but one was an Angkor period guardian deity dating to circa 921 to 945, and a lintel featuring a carving of an anthropomorphic dragon from the mid-7th century. The returns are the result of an ongoing investigation into New York gallery dealer and known trafficker Doris Weiner, who died in 1981, and her daughter Nancy Weiner, who in 2021 pled guilty to her own role in trafficking looted artifacts by DA Alvin Bragg. Which means we can celebrate because the DA's Antiquities Trafficking Unit has done it again, and in so doing have reached a major milestone worth updating you all on. That unit has now convicted 18 individuals of cultural property-related crimes, recovered more than 6,350 cultural treasures, including rare books, works of art, and antiquities valued at more than $490 million US, and returned almost 6,000 of those so far to 38 countries. And raising eyebrows across the arts world last week, the chairman of the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts, Rodney Mims Cook Jr., became the first in his position to attend the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum hosted by Russian President Vladimir Putin in nearly a decade. Today's sources explain that attendance of high-profile Western leaders at the event designed to attract foreign investment in Russia has dropped since the nation's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, with BBC noting that Ukrainian drones struck oil and military targets on the outskirts of the city June 3rd in the lead-up to the four-day forum. Reuters reported that Cook led a U.S. delegation to the event, joining a Thursday roundtable discussion moderated by Russian cultural envoy Mikhail Shvaidkoy, the man behind Russia's pavilion in this year's Venice Biennale. And Cook also spoke during Friday's plenary session while giving a personal hello to Putin on behalf of Trump. The art newspaper tells us that other outspoken supporters of the Russian invasion of Ukraine who have been sanctioned by the European Union, namely Director of the State Hermitage Museum Mikhail Poitrovsky and Russian Culture Minister Olga Lyubimova, were at the table with Cook and Shvaidkoy. Shvaidkoy? I'm really not sure. This caught our attention, honeys, because it's kind of alarming to see this buddy-buddy cozying up by these American officials to the Russians, much less any U.S. presence at this foreign investment-aimed event, especially so soon after so much controversy over Russian arts and culture in relation to their Biennale presence. We're really wondering what the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts was hoping for here. What were their aims? Were they thinking about developing a future relationship with the Russians? What's going on? In a related headline, reports of damage to the collections after a Crimean museum was struck by Ukrainian drones. This was part of a recent escalation in strikes on supply chains to Russian-controlled territory around Sevastopol in the Black Sea Peninsula, according to statements made to Telegram early Wednesday by the city's Russian-appointed governor, yet another Mikhail by the last name of Razvozhayev. Emergency responders were reportedly dispatched to the site where they extinguished a fire, but the museum's early 20th century panorama painting by Franz Ribot, The Siege of Sevastopol, was one of several pieces damaged. This is, honeys, a highly unanticipated headline. That damage came from the Ukrainian side, as the nation has consistently condemned Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea, and as today's sources point out, quote, following the full-scale invasion in 2022, protests have increasingly focused on the peninsula's role in the looting of Ukrainian cultural property, end quote. One such example concurrently in the headlines, staff at Ukraine's Alexei Shovkonenko Kherson Oblast Art Museum identified an allegedly Russian-looted painting by artist Nina Marchenko taken from their collection in 2022 in a photo taken during an official visit by the, quote, Occupation Administration, end quote, to Crimea's Central Museum of Tavrida within the last few weeks. If anything, the headline serves to show that nothing, not even cultural heritage, is entirely safe from the damage caused by war, no matter its perpetrator's intentions. In a more humorous story of destruction, a Pinecone-wielding child damaged a Magritte Masterwork at a museum in Israel last week. Haaretz reports that a 6-year-old boy was visiting the institution with his family when he found a pine cone in the museum's sculpture garden and used it to puncture the canvas several weeks ago. Despite the quick intervention of a security guard, the 1959 painting, The Castle of the Pyrenees, is undergoing several weeks of conservation and repairs, according to the head of the museum's conservation department. The Why We Care here, that painting is actually considered among the most significant works of the 20th century, commissioned by a lawyer and friend of Magritte, Harry Torziner, who hung it to hide the unpleasant view from the window of his Manhattan office. Also, we're wondering, honeys, as reports of visitor damage to artworks seem to be on the rise over the last couple years, what other protective and proactive measures should be taken to prevent these issues? DM us your solutions. And the fact that I'm asking you to DM us your opinions means that we have arrived at the thinker section of today's episode, the stories in which I want to know, what would you do? So leave comments, DM us, or otherwise inform us, pausing the episode as necessary to send in your own hot take. Our first story in this category, a bit of a warning to the entire arts world, a survey by ArtNet and the Association of Women in the Arts found that nearly half of Gen Z and millennial-aged women are questioning whether they can afford to stay in the art industry, which means that nearly half of mid-career women are thinking of leaving the art world. Responses from over 2,000 survey participants point consistently towards the same problems preventing sustainable long-term careers, as well as the same tangible solutions. Quote, fair pay, more transparency in decision-making, mentorship, and better tools to reduce mounting administrative burdens, end quote. And that percentage is really significant. It means that we are not probably going to see a lot of those workers who should be moving into leadership roles and hiring the next generation of arts professionals doing so. So the arts may be facing an imminent talent pipeline crisis, especially with these structural barriers peaking at mid-career, according to survey respondents. Interestingly enough, though, as a part of this study, there were many women who responded favorably to having experimented with AI, showing that, quote, while there are real material concerns about how AI should be used, it is evident that, if adopted meaningfully and intentionally to support workers rather than replace them, it could be transformational for women who are bearing the brunt of administrative and other forms of undervalued labor, end quote. And that, honeys, gives us a little bit of hope for the ways in which AI can become a sustainable part of our workflow. All the same, what are you thinking when you hear about this imminent talent pipeline crisis? What do the honeys think that the demographics of the art world will look like in 5-10 years? We learned that French scientists have developed a new technology to help identify forged artworks. The group from the Polytechnic University of Hauts-de-France in Valenciennes published the study in the peer-reviewed June 2026 issue of Surface Topography, Metrology, and Properties, introducing a newly developed method that they say will help authenticate artworks and identify potential forgeries. The key, they say, is partially in the title there. It's surface metrology, essentially the texture and topography of a painting's brushstrokes, which has been, quote, historically developed mainly for industrial applications and mechanical engineering, end quote, as one researcher explained to Art News. But surface metrology can also be used like a fingerprint, they say, to zero in on the authorship of a particular artwork. The study used pieces by Van Gogh to demonstrate how this non-invasive technique can compare fractal dimensions via very high-resolution scans of the object's surfaces, with the technology correctly identifying one known fake and one recently authenticated work as such. This news is exciting for that, greater ability to authenticate works, but even more so because the scientists involved here do not expect this type of analysis to replace traditional connoisseurship, but to assist it. Hooray for not giving more jobs to AI. What do you think, honeys? Does this sound like BS to you, or do you think that these brushstrokes really can give us a clue as to what's fake and what's real? And that's our show, honeys. Your buzz for the week, your recap of all the best Beesness coming out of the arts world. I'm off to go do sports things, which is a great reminder for all of us to hydrate or dihydrate. But I will catch you for our mini-series drop of The Masterful Mr. Right on Saturday, and next week, Tuesday, for our Beesness once again. Take care, and we'll talk soon. For this episode of Highbrow Honeys the Beesness, master's degree holder of art history, Celia Bugno, did all of the fact-checking, researching, hosting, editing, and producing, while Chris Meinhold took care of our music. If you like our content, please help support us by hitting subscribe and by sending the link to this episode to 2 friends.